We're here. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you can join us today. And as you heard, we're going to record this webinar for folks who aren't able to join us. And they'll be able to, view it at a later time. This is the first of a series of webinars that'll be offered this year through the Community-Based Partners Work Group. It's part of the California Environmental Literacy Initiative, or CALI. And I'm really excited to introduce Estrella Rissinger, the executive director of the, I'm going to get the names right, the Association of, I'm going to introduce you to Estrella, and she's going to take it from here and guide you through the webinar. And we just want to thank you for being here and making time today, and thank Estrella and Susan for offering this terrific webinar on demonstrating our collective impact and digging into the data of environmental education providers in California. Now, let you take it away, Estrella.
Thanks so much, Linda. Really pleased to be here in collaboration with CALI, representing EOE and our providers all across the state. And I know folks are just starting to trickle in. We're really glad you're here. I do want to kick things off by acknowledging that our virtual meeting is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. We acknowledge and honor the ancestral grounds of these communities and support the stewardship of these lands according to local Indigenous wisdom and practice. Personally, I'm joining from Uchin, currently known as Oakland, California. I sit on stolen land that has been cared for by Lishan Aloni since time immemorial. I hope that you'll join us in sharing our appreciation for the past and present stewardship of the places we live, work, and play, and commit to shaping a future that is just. And we would welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat. If you want to let us know what org you're representing or where you're joining from, please do so. It'd be great to see who is in the room, who is joining us today, and what kinds of perspectives you'll bring to our session. The California Environmental Literacy Initiative is just so excited to share this out. And as Linda said, Linda is one of the members of the hub and the lead of this particular project. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that project, give you some context into the work that we're doing, and share a little bit about my organization, the Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education. I know there are lots of folks out there who are familiar with our work, and some might be new to what we do. So our mission is to strengthen environmental education in California by connecting providers, building professional expertise, and championing environmental literacy and outdoor learning. We are a network of dedicated individuals and organizations that are committed to using environmental and outdoor education as a tool to create lasting environmental change. We are guided by the work of our members, EE providers, practitioners, and environmental champions across the state. We also serve as the state affiliate of the North American Association of Environmental Education, representing California in the largest community of environmental educators in the world. And if you have not spent time with us before, we hope you'll check out our work, and perhaps we'll see you at a future program or event. I'm really pleased to share a little bit about the California Environmental Literacy Initiative. In addition to my work with AEOE, I also get to serve as the co-chair of this initiative. And this is a collective action network. It is seeking to ensure that there is access to high quality environmental-based learning for all of California's TK through 12 students. The initiative is led by 10 strands, and it works statewide with guidance from its various members to create systems change in order to ensure that all students have access to high-quality environmental-based learning. The members of this collective action network include a wide array of expertise and contributions from educators, government and non-government agencies, nonprofits, scientists, sustainability professionals, and individuals with expertise on the environment and systems change. The initiative is structured in this way so that members can engage as participants, activators, leaders, advisors, and guests. And we certainly encourage you to learn more about CALI if this is your first time kind of getting wind of what it is that they do. They have lots of great resources that are available for folks from all sorts of different perspectives and settings, some that are focused on this community, on EE providers, and others that are more geared towards people in county offices of ed, or from other positions working to advance environmental literacy in our state. Most of the community is focused on either an innovation hub or an initiative, and we come together periodically to collaborate, to work together. And you can see our work here in the Community-Based Partner Hub is one that is guided and supported by members in all of these other spaces. Within the Innovation Hub, we have a set of our own goals, things that we're working towards to advance environmental literacy from the provider perspective. And you can see some of what we're doing here today in this webinar really touch on a number of these goals, where we're convening all of you here to engage in discussion, really working to elevate our work in our sector through understanding the data of what it is that we do, and finding opportunities for improvement, and really to help kind of strengthen the pathways and opportunities for us to work in collaboration with schools and districts, so that we really can be a more cohesive unit advancing our work around the state. So we have two presenters today. I'm going to kick things off and talk about a survey that AEOE did a couple of years ago. And then I'll turn things over to my friend and colleague, Sarah Whiting, who is going to be sharing about work that Tenstrans has done in collaboration. And we're really looking at data around community-based providers that was conducted with different audiences, and really helps us to have a great understanding of what is happening on the ground, to, again, think about where we can make improvements, where we can really help to elevate our work. So I'll start with what we did, oopsies, at AEOE. We conducted a landscape analysis that was based on a survey that we developed in collaboration with our partners at GenThrive and with other statewide and regional associations across the nation. So as I mentioned earlier, California is part of the North American Association for Environmental Education. And that just means we collaborate closely with our sister organizations in, say, Kentucky, or in Maine, or in Colorado. And together we created a survey tool where we had opportunities to customize our questions based on our regions, based on the communities that we engage. But for the most part, we wanted to be able to compare apples to apples. And so we developed a number of questions that we thought would really help to elevate our work that could be potentially rolled up into a data set that represents our whole nation. So that we really can understand what is the state of environmental education through our provider network across the nation. We worked with a number of different partners and sponsors here in California. You can see the California Environmental Literacy Initiative was really critical in our community-based partner hub in advising on those questions, and really thinking about how to disseminate our survey, and helping to make sure we had a really strong outreach list. We've reached out to more than 700 providers to try and see if folks would participate in this effort. And ultimately, we heard back from 104 providers who completed at least 80% of the survey. So we know that there are a lot more out there that we need to engage with to ensure that we have their data included in this project. And there were a lot of folks that did a partial completion. So what I'm going to share today really just represents kind of the completed responses that came through, and is a snapshot of some of the areas that we investigated, recognizing that there is so much more that we can understand with this data, and lots more as well that we want to be exploring with a wider representation of our providers. That said, looking at the initial responses, we did get a pretty wide range of folks. We have organizations with no staff. We have organizations with 300 staff and plus, who participated. We have organizations with budgets that are smaller than $100,000, and we have organizations with organizational budgets, over 2 million, and everything in between. So, it really did feel like we had a pretty wide sampling from what we looked at in terms of geographic disbursement, the types of organizations, that responded and whatnot. So as we dig into the data, I think you'll see that there's quite a lot of diversity in what we found. But we want to make sure that we have a more accurate representation ultimately. So if this is exciting to you and you're not part of the project yet, that will be one of your action items is to get involved. So what did we find? One of the things that we wanted to look at was to see who was being supported by these programs. And what I'm sharing today are not kind of individual responses, but the summation. We were really looking at what is our collective impact. When we set out to do this work, we realized that we didn't have a very good understanding of what is the collective impact of our work across the entire state. We hear incredible anecdotes from individual organizations. You know that your work is impactful. We know that your work is impactful, but we don't have a real sense of kind of the size and scope of what environmental education providers are doing. So that's really what we set out to answer with this, so that we could have this common baseline and really understand what's happening in this moment, so that as we continue to advocate and champion for more resources for our sector, increase access to environmental learning opportunities, we would at least know what we were starting from. So here's what we found. Not a big surprise. We can see that certainly folks in the kind of middle elementary, moving into lower high school is where we have the majority of our program support, working with those grade levels, and certainly the most kind of at that upper elementary. So there's definitely an opportunity here to be, better engaging older students, better engaging pre-service teachers and other educators, and certainly leaning more into the general public space, doing multi-generational programming, as well as our pre-K and early childhood folks. So that's definitely a community that we know needs a lot of access to outdoor learning and could be a place for us to grow. As you can see, we have a wide variety of where folks are conducting their programming. So, almost 50% are taking place outside of the school site, so off campus. But, a number that are still operating in a virtual setting. So this work was done in 2023, when programs were really back in action. And so really interesting to see how that's something that has really shifted for many of us. And I know a lot of folks are still offering kind of hybrid options or have virtual programming as a supplementary component that has stuck around. We were also really interested in seeing, what kinds of programs and services are provided. And as you can see here, most organizations are offering that kind of direct instruction, experiences, a lot of field trips, happening off-site, as we saw from the last slide. In some places we have curriculum that's being developed and offered, professional development that is offered, even some grant funding in some cases. So, a wide variety of services. So this could be an area to explore for a provider if you're thinking about how to offer something that's a little bit unique, in your area. Most of the programming is happening within the school day. Some kind of focus just on summer. So we did have some summer camps who participated, or programs that do work in the summer, but the organization itself may also do school year programming. And I was really pleased to see that this question about the percentage of programming conducted outdoors, the large majority of us are doing our programming outdoors, either to some extent or, to a very significant extent, or even completely outside. And this was a question that we added onto our California survey. And it was really exciting to see that that was a question that other regions, so the PEEPS region, which is the Plains, and also includes Colorado, who conducted a similar survey and whole process immediately following ours, they added that to their survey tool, and that's now becoming standardized, that other regions are asking the same question because they feel like it's a really important one. We asked questions about program content to get a sense of what the themes were that people were supporting in their programs. And you can see the top themes that emerged are on the left. So these are the ones that were most common in our responses, that conservation, outdoor learning, STEM and water are the themes that are kind of most relevant or offered for within our current communities. But again, a great opportunity there if you see a need, and we'll get into how to identify some of those needs in a little bit. But this could be a place for you to expand your programming or to grow if you find that there's a, something that doesn't have as much support right now. It could be an opportunity to perhaps lean in and develop some new programming on a theme that is not addressed as much in your region. As I mentioned earlier, one of the big purposes for us in doing this work was, yes, to understand kind of what's happening on the ground, but also to really understand what is our impact overall. So being able to see, how many students are supported by our organizations, by our work is really impactful. And again, these numbers represent just responses from 104 out of approximately 750 organizations that we reached out to. So it's just under 14% of the organizations that we received, full responses from. And when we kind of extrapolate that and just think about how many students are supported across the state, it's much more significant. But yet when we look at that and we look at the sheer number of students that are in the state of California, there's an enormous gap. So, that really is alarming when we think about two things. One, how important it is to partner with schools and support classroom teachers so that environmental learning experiences are happening during the school day within the classroom setting, or within the school site setting. And also, how much more we can be supporting students in these programs. And I know that from my experience working within an EE provider setting, it can often feel like that feeling of scarcity, that competition between providers, unfortunately can really impact our ability to collaborate, and want to work together. And I think, to me, this is really illustrative of the fact that there are so many students out there who need this type of programming, who are not engaging in what we have to offer. So really an opportunity to expand our work in significant ways. We were also interested in just kind of seeing what is the focus of the organizations. Are they working, do we have, in California, we're a leader in a lot of things. Do we have a lot of providers who are offering programming, more broadly or perhaps even internationally? And it looks like the large majority are keeping it local, with some who have work that might be a little bit more expansive. Staffing. This was a really big question for us, and really, wanting to understand what does the organization kind of look like in terms of its governance structure and who is employed by this sector. So as we can see, the large majority of our providers are in the nonprofit space. And so what does that tell us? That tells us that the need for philanthropic support for environmental education is very significant. Knowing that is one of the ways that nonprofits are able to, fund and support their programs is through charitable donations. And yet we are a very, very, very small slice of the pie when you look at kind of where charitable dollars are directed. And so, something just interesting for us in terms of our structure. And, you can see that there were some people also who participated who are in some different settings. So we do have some for-profits, we had some government agencies, and even some schools who participated, who offer services, to their community. In terms of our people power, we were really curious about, who is employed by our sector and kind of what is our economic footprint. As I mentioned, the budget piece was one that was really interesting for us, but I think even more so thinking about who is, employed in this work. And I think it's just, when I look at this, one of my big takeaways is just the significant number of people who rely on volunteers for this work. And we know that we have seen a drop in volunteerism over the last few years. And so this is something to really be looking at if this is if your organization relies on your volunteer workforce, really thinking about what can you do to retain your volunteers, to support your volunteers, in addition to your existing staff. And what this doesn't necessarily reflect our for part-time staff or full-time staff, to what extent are they seasonal staff, which I think is a question that we'll want to be asking in the future, because we know that can have a lot of kind of economic risk for some folks, and opportunity depending on where people are at in their in their career trajectory, and what it is they're looking for. But really interesting to see. And again, this is a small slice of the pie because this is only represents about 14%, of the total organizations that we had identified as being e-providers in the state. Another area that we were really interested in exploring was trying to understand what it was that organizations were doing to support equity, inclusion, and diversity. And AEOE engaged in some focus groups as a lead up, to this survey launching back in 2022. And we asked a number of providers, and we did this regionally. So we had conversations within the different 11, creek regions around the state and asked folks what this looked like, within their organization and how folks are, centering equity and talking about inclusivity within their organizations. And we were really surprised that it did not seem to be as much of a priority as we felt like it could and should be in many parts of the state, and within many organizations. And so this was an area that we wanted to really think about to see what are folks already doing and what kind of support might they need, based on what we see. And so it was really exciting to see, how many of the organizations, significantly more than half have been doing some kind of internal training for their staff and their board. Also about half of the organizations who responded have some type of new partnerships that support this work. Around the same are doing program and curriculum revision. So my assumption is that is, really trying to make programming more culturally relevant and, kind of looking for ways to, better reflect the learners that you're engaging. A similar number, I have been working on staff and board diversification, and I'll share some more data around that in just a minute. But that was really exciting to see, and it's something that differs from some of the other regions around the state. So I think this is an area that we can really feel proud of the work that California has done, and still recognize that we have a lot more growth to do and opportunity, to fully represent the communities that we're engaging. Also, about half of the organizations worked on some mission, vision, values revision. So, really thinking about those guiding documents and that kind of deeper integration, how, critical that is for the work. All the way down to looking at marketing materials, perhaps some external training, and a smaller group that are doing some affinity work, for their staff. So to me, as a takeaway, as a statewide network, that's a great opportunity for us to perhaps think about ways to connect organizations or to provide some of that affinity space, regionally or even statewide, if it's something that organizations themselves, don't have capacity to do. All right, so representation, what does this look like and what do we find? I'll share, according to the US Census data, approximately 60% of working adults in California identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. So if you look at these numbers, and it's a little hard to tell what the percentages, but basically we asked organizations to identify their staff and then kind of separating that out to their senior staff, so kind of their C-suite of executives, folks in management positions, and folks had a kind of a percentage system. So do 1 to 19% of your staff identify as BIPOC, or do 20 to 39% of your staff identify as BIPOC? And I want to recognize that the difference between 1 and the difference between like 18, that's a big difference, and that matters. So I think there's it's hard to exactly know what it is what we're looking at here, but I think in terms of the we don't know, at least for our staff, those are some pretty small slivers. And that is really exciting to see, that for the most part, organizations who responded are collecting this information of their staff, which we know is really important. If we don't have a baseline data, then how do we, mark our growth and change over time? And we had, certainly some areas where we can see growth at that senior level. We see less BIPOC representation and certainly not as strong based on the pie charts. And that also drops down significantly with the leadership at the board level. So a lot of opportunity for improvement here. and really thinking about, especially in those decision-making roles, what that looks like. But I am really glad to see that at least that piece around collecting this information is one that seems to be shared as a value by our sector. And now we really need to do the work, around thinking about retaining staff of color and looking at opportunities for promotion, as well as, kind of that pathway into more leadership roles. We asked questions around LGBTQIA plus identification as well, and recognized that collecting that information is a little bit more sensitive. It's not something that every organization does, and so I think that's something that we certainly need to think about how we can support organizations, what tools we can provide around data collection, because we did have larger slices for each of these categories where there was a we don't know. And so thinking about how we can help organizations so that they do know is something that I think is important for us to be considering. From our last community survey that we sent out, the last 2 years actually, AEOE has been doing this every year, about 25% of our community identify as LGBTQIA. So just to kind of compare that to what we see here, and recognizing, again, this is an area where we want to continue to grow and make sure that we're being representative of the communities that we're serving. All right, I want to get into salary and pay. So this is one of the things that we asked for each of the programs, was information about what the starting salary is for program staff. And again, there was a range there, and we recognize that like $16 to $20 an hour, right? That makes a really big difference paycheck to paycheck. But we wanted to have kind of ballpark understanding. So from the data we collected, we were able to determine kind of a median starting salary for our state. Now, comparing that to the living wage, and that is the MIT living wage that is for one adult with no children for the entire state of California, that is $27.32. Whew. Bummer, right? We are not supporting our staff with a living wage in this sector. And again, if we look at kind of geographic disbursement also, the large majority of our students live in urban areas. The large majority of our programs are situated in urban areas where that cost of living is typically higher. So this, presents a tremendous opportunity to be doing a much better job as a sector to bring in resources to support our staff so that this can be a living wage and can be a sustainable career. Another area that we looked at that we were really curious about was evaluation methods, and wanting to see what are folks doing to evaluate the success of their programs, to evaluate their impact. And this is one where you can see on the left, a significant number of programs are using surveys. So whether it's a pre and a post or just a post program survey, we see a lot of programs are leaning on that as a typical evaluation tool. We also had a significant number of programs that are doing some type of a qualitative or an informal method. What that looks like, we're not sure exactly. So that could be an area for further exploration, is to better understand, what do people mean by informal? Is that like a thumbometer, or is it like actually using some kind of embedded assessment or focus groups, or kind of what level of rigor and intention is happening there. But very few are using external evaluation partners or rubrics, and there are definitely a number who are doing no evaluation at all. So a lot of opportunity for us to be providing support and working together, sharing some tools and resources to help folks with evaluation. As I said, that's not everything that we dug into. I just wanted to kind of pull out some of the top findings that I thought were really interesting, that may have been of interest to all of you to share out and for you to consider. So where are we at? What's happening with this project? The first piece, as I've shared, is we need more data. We need more organizations to participate so we really can get a better understanding of what's happening, and build out those numbers so that we have, we're much closer to that 750 EE providers that we've identified around the state. So that's the first one. And we are working with GenThrive, our partner. I know they've been improving their survey tools. For those of you who participated the first time around, thank you, thank you. You know, I know that there were some glitches. It was a little challenging getting into the survey, and really appreciate your persistence and your participation. And we have made some improvements, so it should be a lot easier now for folks. And we're continuing to look at, you know, how we can, you know, ask our questions in a way that's more clear, you know, perhaps kind of change some of the, you know, multiple choice options to really get at exactly, you know, what it is we want to know. So really excited about where that's going. We also, based on our data, have been developing some different tools. And one example is the EE guidance for equitable pay and hiring in environmental education. You know, we really saw that what we're looking at, those salary numbers were really striking. And this has become something that has been really a rallying cry, you know, for our sector. And huge thanks to the Southeast region of the US, actually led by the Kentucky affiliate, for doing the initial, you know, groundwork in developing this equitable pay and guidance document, which we were able to, you know, embed some of our California data to make it even more relevant for our state. So within that document, there's a lot of kind of national research and best practices around equitable pay and hiring, along with specific benchmarks and targets that your organization can make. And recommendations for the process, you know, all from the establishing the job description to looking at a living wage, you know, and all the way through retention. So really encourage y'all to check that out. We're also thinking about what kinds of professional development can we offer based on what we found. So that piece around evaluation that we were just looking at, this group is going to be hosting a webinar later this year on creative evaluation methods and looking at how to move kind of beyond the survey. And so we're really excited for that webinar. It hasn't been posted yet, but it'll happen later in the spring. At AEOE's Program Leader Retreat in the end of January, beginning of February, we're planning to be focusing on evaluation as well. So that's an in-person opportunity to get together with other program leaders, to share tools, to hear from some experts about what they've done, and really think about, you know, evaluation. That's going to be our theme for the Program Leader Retreat. So those are some of the opportunities that we have, and we imagine there'll be others, you know, that will emerge based on what we found when we see these gaps and we see places where we can, you know, better support our community. And then we have these online tools to explore our data. So I'm going to dig into them a little bit. And I know I've been kind of rapid fire, but I hope that you're sticking with me. So we have a couple of tools that came out that reference the data that we collected. One is the dashboard, which you see on the bottom, and that's where a lot of those charts and graphs and whatnot, you know, came out of, where you can toggle the information yourself. So if you want to see, for example, if you want to focus just on nonprofits, you can pull that up and then see, you know, information pertinent to nonprofits. If you want to say, you know, look at organizations that have, you know, higher percentages of like BIPOC staff, and then see what was responded to there in terms of, you know, program theme or, you know, what type of entity they are or when they're offering their program example, you can do that kind of toggling within the dashboard. So that's an exciting tool for us to learn more about, you know, our sector and kind of be able to play with that data in real time. The other tool that we created is a climate equity and environmental education map. And I'll spend a little bit more time with this one because it's one that I know can be really exciting and a little overwhelming when you first see it. So
friends with Sue. We got a couple. Caroline Roberts.
all right, here we go. So here are a few of just some of the examples of what you can do with this map. So this is all of those, the red dots should be the providers that we had on our outreach list. So you can see where those providers are clustered. You can see, you know, where they exist across the state. And these were some of the things that we pulled up. So I'm just going to share a few of the pieces that I think are interesting, especially when we think about program relevancy and better understanding who we're serving and thinking about, you know, equity and access, you know, and all of these important questions. So incorporated into these layers, we have the Social Vulnerability Index, Justice 40 tracks. So you can see where there are, you know, the darker colors are where we have kind of more vulnerable communities as identified through these different maps. So something really interesting to be thinking about in terms of where our programs are situated, or who we're serving, and what kinds of needs there might be. Another way to look at these maps is through some of the different climate risks, or in particular thinking about environmental justice concerns or opportunities, when it comes to, again, expanding and tweaking programming so that it's more relevant. So these are just some of the layers that I pulled up that we've incorporated onto the map to look at your provider and kind of zoom in on that area, and see what particular concerns might be relevant for your community. So I want to give you a little bit of time to actually get into the map and play around. So let me go ahead and put it into the chat, and then I'll walk you through how to do this. And I see the question. I want to comment on this question from Sierra. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to give you a link to all of the resources that I mentioned, a landing page that has the map, the dashboard, and the EE guidance for equitable pay and hiring, so that you can pull it up yourself. I realized the link that I copied over was so long that I think it would be a little tricky. So I'll let you have the direct link through the landing page instead, and that'll come on my next slide. So with the map, basically, we want you to, be able to zoom in on your region a little bit and explore the layers. So as you're exploring, I want you to consider these two questions, really thinking about how the map could support your efforts to make your programming more relevant, and what can you learn about the communities that you engage, in your region. And so if I'm looking at the map, once I get in,
I found if you click on your state, that allows you to pull up the map.
Thank you,
I got
Linda.
the same
Yeah, I
message.
had that same issue when I was looking earlier, and I was hoping that it was just a kind of a misprint. Okay, well, let's do it together, and so then we can walk through what it should look like. And I'll check in with the Gen Thrive team about that, because that should definitely not be happening. But yes, when I was looking at it earlier today, if you go, so they've got this done kind of by region, and there should be a, the state of California that we can find. So yep, page not found. Oh no. But if I go to my state maps, I should be able to see it. So unfortunately, that direct link to California is pushing you back to kind of the overarching piece. Great, thanks, Sean, for putting the state maps there in the link. So it should, or in the chat, so it should get like this. There's some instructions about kind of how to make this work, what to do. I'm going to jump right on into the map itself so that you can see what it looks like. And of course, with GIS, right, it's going to take just a minute to load, because there's a lot on here. Our team, one of the hard questions was, thinking about which mapping layers are we going to include. And this is one that we're always looking for, additional ideas for thinking about what would be relevant. So if you have suggestions for mapping layers that are not on here yet, but should be, we would definitely welcome them. And of course, when I tested this out, like 10 minutes before we started, it was working just fine. Now my computer has slowed down a little bit. Okay, great. Looks like it's finally starting to go. So you can see there's that same image we were looking at before. I should have, my mapping layers popping up in just a second here, where I can see my 3 different categories. So there should be the oopsies. There should be, let's see. Okay, if I click on map layers, here we go. I'm not sure why that didn't come up right away. That really is the most important thing. All right, I'm gonna scooch that over so I can really focus on that map layers. So that's the image here on the left. It kind of looks like pancakes or like sandwiches, piled on top of each other. And within this, I have my education, I have my community, and I have my environment. And that's where I can add, different components, zoom in on a region. It is really hard to see statewide just because there's so much, data in each of these layers. So recommend, zooming into a specific region and playing around. So I'm going to mute myself and just give you a couple of minutes to explore and see what you can find. And I'll put back these questions so that we can take a look again of how can this map support your efforts to make your programming more relevant, and what can you learn about the communities that you engage. All right, I'm going to bring us back together. I know that was just a teaser, such a short amount of time to really dig in, but hopefully, you will spend some time playing with this. I could see it being used at a staff meeting, perhaps spending some time working with your team to, dig into it, see what you can find, see what's interesting. Certainly let us know if there are other layers that you use. I would love to see them. I would love to learn about them. We can always be adding and continuing to improve upon what we have here. And I hear some questions there about like, how do we get more folks on the map? Yes, so this is our call to action. First, we want to make sure that we have additional organizations and programs. So if you're not on there, I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat to make sure that you get on there. And this is how you contribute your information. Ideally, you'll do all of it so that we have all of the important information about your programs and your staff, but really as much as you can get to it, great, we'll take it. And the GenThrive team, is available. They've got their contact info on that landing page to help get you, sorted and into the program. So really hope to get other organizations on there. The other piece is for all of the tools, the mapping tool, the EE guidance for equitable pay, some of our initial analysis that we've done so far, and the dashboard, all of those can be found through that landing page that I just shared, the EE landscape analysis. So that has links to all of those different components and will be our landing page as we continue to build out additional tools and whatnot. So really hope that you will play around with these tools, that you will spend some time in there and that you will contribute if you haven't already. The idea, just to respond to the question that Jody posed, thank you for the question. The idea is that the dashboard should be able to be accessed in real time. I know that's the direction that they're going, so that as folks add their data, it should be able to show up. In terms of the analysis, that's something that, we hope to do every year, every other year, or something like that, so we can see some change over time. And really for us, in terms of like the big push, we'll probably have specific time periods where we're really trying to encourage people to, get their information on there, or like get yourself updated if you haven't done it in a year or so. But recognize it probably will be a kind of an ongoing trickle. But yeah, in terms of the maintenance, that's ongoing. But the survey and the map, that should be, referenced kind of and updated in real time. All right, I would love to answer more questions, but I want to make sure that we get time to kick things over and learn from another data project that took a different angle and has so much more to share about our sector and how we work in collaboration with the K-12 school district. So I'll turn things over to you, Sarah, and just let me know in terms of how I can update the slides to support you.
Great, thanks, Estrella. So I'm Sarah Whiting. I'm the Director of Client Engagement and Data Science Services at 10 Strands, or you can just call me the Data Girl, because I am part of these huge data projects that we've been doing with 10 Strands, also in collaboration with Callie and the Lawrence Hall of Science. And Estrella's been talking about EE provider impact and opportunities for expansion and growth from the EE provider point of view. And now we're going to flip it over to the formal ed K-12 school point of view to talk about how they would measure impact of EE providers and some opportunities that you might be able to see when utilizing these data. So the first data set we're going to talk about is the Peaks and Valleys report, which was a collaboration between the Lawrence Hall of Science, the Callie and 10 Strands groups. And this was a survey-based landmark study where we sent out surveys not just through our environmental networks, but through networks like the California Teachers Association as well, to try to get a reach from as many teachers as we possibly can. And we received about 1,080 surveys, mostly from educators and some from administrators as well, across all 58 counties in California. So we got some really good representation. Now, we have many more educators than that, so it is still a very small sampling of educators across our state with 938 public school districts across the state and many teachers in each of those. But it's a good sampling, and when we compared it against the census for those regions, we saw that there wasn't a huge amount of underrepresentation or overrepresentation of any of the regions, with just a little bit of under or over in some of the regions. And overall, the respondents were feeling like they were pretty high on the pro-environmental attitude scale, which is a hopeful thing when we're thinking about trying to partner with EE providers. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This report is much larger, and you will have access to all the things that educators feel about environmental literacy. But we wanted to point out a few things that really stood out in terms of measuring the metrics or providing opportunities for our community-based partners. So one big takeaway that we saw from the survey is that nonprofits and other community-based partners were really essential in providing that environmental literacy professional learning for educators, both from the point of view of administrators and of educators. So we can see that there are 33% or 30% of administrators and educators who said that significantly or to a great extent their professional learning came from nonprofits. And 46% or 35% said to some extent it was coming from nonprofits. So overall, the majority of professional learning that these educators and administrators were receiving came from our community-based partners. So that's a huge impact that's being had by the folks that are in this room. Next slide. But we did see that there was a need for more outdoor environmental literacy experiences. So in terms of the opportunities there to expand programs, when we're looking at the on-site environmental literacy experiences, the majority of them are happening in the classroom. Some are happening on outside school grounds, and some are happening in co-curricular clubs or activities. But then when we're thinking about off-site environmental literacy experiences, we only have about 8% of people saying that they regularly or often go on field trips, and only 5% saying that they regularly or often engage in outdoor ed, and only 9% on walking field trips in their community. So there is a big space there for more of those opportunities for formal ed students within the school day or after the school day. Next slide. Additionally, of the educators that were polled, over 80% said they wish they could teach more about environmental literacy. So there is a need and a hunger there for this work to be happening, which is really exciting to see. Next slide. And when educators were polled on what they would want to increase the environmental literacy instruction in their classroom, over 52% of educators who responded to this survey said that partnerships with local organizations were a high priority for them. So those educators are looking to connect with our community-based partners in order to engage in this work. Next slide. The other data project that we're working on is the environmental and climate action scorecard that the 10 Strands team has been working on for the last few years. We have been working with the UC Berkeley data discovery interns to basically comb through the web, looking at district websites and looking at news articles and other data sources to see where is environmental and climate action happening across the state and across the system. So in terms of school board commitments, in terms of campus sustainability, curriculum, community and culture, staffing, basically, if we're thinking we want to move this forward as a whole systems change, where is it happening and where is it not happening? Now, because this was not a survey, we do have data on every single district within the entire state of California. Again, it's publicly available evidence, so some more things may be happening than we captured, but right now it's our way of kind of getting a broad picture of where this work is happening within school districts. Next slide. And some interesting things about the data we found is that around 56% of districts have passed a board policy saying that they will have environmental education within their schools. And around 57% of districts have at least one indicator of environmental or climate literacy, but only 26% of districts show any evidence of environmental field trips, and there's much fewer pieces of evidence of that outdoor learning or connecting with community-based partners. So there's definitely a gap between where districts are saying they want to be and what's actually showing up in these data. Next slide. And then finally, we also mapped what's happening at the county level. So thinking about county government organizations like the county offices of sustainability, if there's any emergency declarations for climate, if there's plans in place for sustainability, and then also what's happening at the county office of education side. So potential other partners to help move this work forward and scale it up amongst multiple districts. So hopefully these are ways for you to see what's the context of the area that you're working in, where are maybe some of those districts who say, yes, we believe in environmental literacy, but there's less evidence that there's capacity or follow through in that district where maybe they could use a little bit of outside support or partnerships in order to get some of those opportunities for their students. So I talked through that very quickly because there's some very rich, interesting data for you to poke around with. So if we go to the next slide, there's QR codes, but I'm also going to drop it in the chat. And the first one will take you to the district scorecard of the 10 Strands Data Initiative. You'll notice that there are a lot of other data sets within this initiative, such as scale data for the districts, equity data for the districts, climate impacts data. So on your own time, feel free to poke around the whole site. But for now, I wanted to focus on what's happening in the districts, and you can zoom in on your own region and start to play around with the filters on the Tableau map and see who has what kinds of indicators. And then there's also a link to the full Peaks and Valleys report if you're interested in what teachers are saying with their boots on the ground, how they feel about environmental literacy and the opportunities that they have available to them. So we're going to give you some time to play around, and then I would love for you to think about the following questions on the next slide. Mr. A, can you move to the next slide? Perfect. So think about what's standing out to you within the data or surprising to you. Do the trends align with the experience that you have in your own regions? How might the findings support your existing or future work? And what else do you want to know? And I'm asking the what else question because this is an evolving data set, and the data initiative is constantly pulling in additional indicators of climate action, as well as other context factors. For example, right now we have someone pulling in all of the percentages of Democratic and Republican votes in the areas of each of the districts, in case you're interested to see if there's a correlation between political leaning and climate action in those districts. So look forward to some cool new correlational data coming out soon. So I'm going to pause and we can turn off our screens and take about, let's say, do we have enough time for like 7 minutes, Estrella, to poke around with the
Yeah,
data?
absolutely. And I just wonder, Sarah, if it's somebody's very first time coming to this page, it's a little overwhelming.
Yes, there's a
How would you
lot.
recommend, like, where do I start? Where do I go? How do I find, you know, the section that you think would be most beneficial for me to begin with?
Great. So there is a video overview at the top if you're that type of learner and would like to have someone lead you through the whole site. So you could watch that. But my favorite part, if you scroll down, you'll see, Estrella, if you can scroll down, you'll keep scrolling. You'll first see, keep scrolling a little bit more, this map once it loads. And this map is basically the overall score for every single district. You can zoom into particular regions. You can also have just a single county using the drop-down filters. And you can also use the sliders to see what the different contexts or scorecard elements are for those districts. So example, yeah, if you do that for curriculum, and then give it a second to load. So we're looking at all of the districts who are scoring 3 or higher. We can see that that has now eliminated a huge amount of the state. So there's a lot of opportunity for environmental curriculum across the state of California. And one thing to keep in mind is the scorecard is not a one-to-one indicator to score ratio. We do have more indicators than points because we know that this is not a prescriptive, everyone must have all of these indicators type situation. This is a way of seeing what's happening across the state and getting a basic measurement. So we know that the context at every district is not the same. So the different strategies and initiatives may not work for every single district. So there are definitely more indicators than points. So please play around, use the drop downs, use the sliders. There's also more analysis down below. And if you're interested in a specific district, if they have a board policy or if they have a field trip piece of evidence, you can also go to where it says more and go to district data validation. So up at the top header part in the navigation bar, where it says more, in the black bar right at the top, Estrella.
Within like district type or?
No, the navigation bar at
Oh.
the very top of the page.
Oh, got it. At the
Yeah,
very,
where
very
it says
top.
more.
Yep. And
And
then
you
district
can go
data
to district
validation.
data validation.
Very cool.
And then there are tables there that have the specific district data for every single district that are searchable. So feel free to play around. There's a lot here. So if you're ever like, Sarah, I need a walkthrough, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to support. There's also video walkthroughs for pretty much every data visualization on the page.
Great. So we're going to give you a little bit of time to explore. So you have about 7 minutes or so. So you can zoom in on your region. You can look at your data or your district. You can look at kind of more broadly. And then we want to hear some takeaways. And I'll go back to the questions that Sarah is posing for us to be exploring as we're looking through. And we'll come back together after you've had an opportunity to poke around. Opportunity to get to. Thanks, Celeste. Let's come back together. Let's give you an opportunity to actually connect with some of the other leaders who are in this space and get to introduce yourself, say hi, and perhaps think about one of these questions that you may want to reflect on together. So I'll go ahead and get some breakouts set up and give you an opportunity to share what have you been learning so far? Is there something really interesting? What stands up to you? What else do you want to know? What did you discover? And I'll get those open now. We'll take maybe about 6 or 7 minutes in our rooms just to have an opportunity to connect and introduce ourselves and discuss. And thanks for being in conversation with one another. It's always hard to tell, right? How much time do people need? It looks like you probably could have used some more time. But we'd love to hear from a few of you, kind of what came up in your conversations. What were some of the takeaways or insights or questions that you have? So feel free to unmute or utilize the chat. But what did you experience and what are you wondering about?
For me, it's just there's so much information. I'm just like, okay, I just really got to start to dive into this, and I'm super focused in on like my area, but then looking at like the larger area and finding ways to make use of all this wonderful data.
Thanks, Carolyn. I hear you. It can be really overwhelming at first, even thinking about like, what do I want to know from all this?
So I was looking at my county in particular. I am the education manager for a nonprofit, and we do field trips and stuff. And my particular county, it seems like the scores are pretty low. So to me, it's like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and so trying to figure out how to come up with those relationships with the district, with the county, with the teachers to provide what it is they need. Like that's kind of our job. So it's sad that our scores were so low, but it's also sort of like exciting that, hey, I've got a lot of work to do. And so just kind of figuring out how to get the ball rolling on that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And, Sarah, I'd be really curious what your insights are about how folks might kind of leverage, these data in a way to promote the need, for this. I mean, I think just thinking about some of the points that you brought up around, more than 50% of boards have some type of a policy, supporting environmental education. Now, we know that when it comes to practice, there's a big gap, but that could be a great place to leverage, if a board doesn't have a policy to say, hey, don't you want to be part of the cool crowd? This is really important. It really is making a statement in a necessary way. Thinking about, especially with SB 285, right, the requirement to have climate instruction within our science curriculum, and that being something that can be leveraged. That's statewide, so everybody should be doing something. And if they're not, to be able as a provider to approach a district to say, it looks like, what we found is there isn't a lot of evidence for this. We can help. We have these tools, we have these services, we have these programs that can ensure that you're meeting this, criteria.
Yeah, definitely. Using it almost like a market research tool can be helpful. Like, hey, we see that you have these initiatives already going, but maybe you want to have a little bit more in this area so that you can have a broader, more robust program that has a more equitable access to all of your students, to environmental literacy and outdoor education, and we can support you with that. There's also a climate impacts page, and so that's another place where you can say, hey, we see that your county is going to be facing these climate impacts. We can educate your students on why and how to react to them, and maybe some solutions they can be part of for these impacts to kind of mitigate and adapt to what's coming down the line in the next decades and now, really.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely one of the kind of outcomes that we're hoping to see with our map that we have, that we helped to produce, is that using it as kind of a market analysis tool, for sure, to see where are there gaps and gluts, in that region. And I will say that is a pretty exciting outcome that the Texas group found. Was they saw, I think it was like south of what they call the Mason-Dixie line, that there was no environmental education provider that they had identified. And so they actually use that as leverage to go to funders to say, this is a huge part of our state that does not have access to environmental learning. And it actually became something that people looked at directing more resources to. So it was something that, to identify, are there existing communities that could, do environmental education? Maybe they're already doing environmental education, but not calling it that. And so how do we connect with them? Or are there providers who are kind of close to that boundary who could expand their reach slightly, to have a kind of a broader community to serve? Anything else that has come up for you, or a question that you're thinking about with what you've seen today?
I'd personally be curious at looking more in depth at the districts with a high climate action and environmental score and finding the common factors, and then being able to bring that to the ones with the low score and say, hey, here's how they were able to do this. And then find out what is that missing gap? Is it purely just something like funding, or are there other things that we could be doing?
Yeah, what are the levers, right, that are going to make the biggest difference? It's a great question.
Keep an eye out. We'll be releasing a report soon with a multiple regression model that will show which of the different contextual elements have the highest reliability of indicating a higher score. And that will begin to answer some of those questions. Like, is it size? Is it money? Is it political leaning? Is it urban versus rural? That's all going into this model to try to figure out what are those levers or barriers.
Really exciting. Well, we hope that you'll continue engaging in these conversations, that you'll continue to explore these tools, that you'll read the report when it comes out, that you'll get your organization, on our map, and submit your data if you're an EE provider. There's a lot of actions that you can take to help support this work that will benefit your organization, but ultimately will benefit all of us. This is a kind of a raising all boats situation here, where we need everybody to participate and contribute, so that we can advocate for more environmental and outdoor learning for all of our young people. That, to me, is the most striking piece. That is, I think, probably the most depressing piece, is the incredible gap between who is getting these programs and services and who is not. But it also presents the most tremendous opportunity to expand the great work that's already happening, to ensure that every young person has access to these experiences. So I just want to do a few appreciations kind of announcements, and then we'll say goodbye to you. Just a big thank you to Sarah and the 10 Strands team for the support, to all of the funders and sponsors and providers and teachers, who contributed to this effort. It really has taken mountains, that we've moved to start this baseline, and just really, really appreciate all of that, and to you all for being here. A few more opportunities that are coming up that I wanted to make sure to share out. So first, AEOE is hosting an EE provider career fair. So this is something that's happening in just a few weeks, around the same time period, in the late afternoon, early evening. This is an online virtual environmental education career fair. So if you're a provider and you have positions open now or even in the future, we hope that you'll consider joining as an employer. If you're potentially interested in exploring what is out there, or just being aware of what kinds of positions are open, or know folks who are considering a career in environmental education. You do not need to be currently employed. This is a great opportunity also to just learn. So if you're somebody who works in particular in higher ed, we're really encouraging folks to attend as a pathway opportunity to learn more about our sector. So register as an employer or a job seeker. We hope to see you there. And I mentioned our program leader retreat. This is something that AEOE hosts annually for folks who are leaders within the EE setting. And we will be focusing on evaluation as our theme. And most of the time is open space and just opportunities to share resources, to bask in the beauty of the Central California coast, and really deepen our connections. There's only so much we can do through Zoom. So much more happens when we get to hang out in real time. So hopes that some of you will join us for our program leader retreat, and that registration is open now. It'll be later in the winter and should be a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to learn and play together. And then one more announcement from AEOE, and that is, I hope that you'll save the date for our statewide conference. We'll be in Marin County at the Walker Creek Ranch the first weekend in May. So the call for workshop proposals will be coming out next month, and you can look for that from us. And really hope to have a great convening of educators from around the state committed to this work. So that should be a really fun time. And we're so glad that you were here. Hopefully you signed up for the other webinars. We have 2 more where we have the dates set. We'll be working in collaboration to offer continued conversations on some of this important work. So in particular, thinking about funding pathways. So we're going to be looking at expanded learning funding, and kind of thinking about how EE providers can tap into that as a funding source, really deepening our connections with schools and districts. We're going to be doing a session on equitable hiring and retention practices. I mentioned we'll be talking about evaluation. We have some other pieces coming up. We just haven't set the dates yet, but please do, pass on the opportunity to your friends and colleagues, your staff, if you're not able to make it. And we definitely hope to see you at one of our future webinars. But finally, we just want to thank you for being here. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the attention. Always great to be in community with folks who share our values and our interests. So hope that you're staying dry out there and taking care of yourself. I know we've been through a lot these past couple of weeks in particular. I know that just there's a lot of emotions, I think, that many of us have been experiencing, in particular post-election, thinking about the work that we do in the communities that we serve, and being together in community is really, really important to maintain the strength of our work, and get support we need as individuals as we kind of navigate what is to come. So really appreciate y'all for showing up and being here to support each other as well as learn for yourself. So please reach out if you have feedback, about this session. I know Celeste is going to be following up with the recording and slides and all of that. So feel free to pass those out to anyone else you think might be interested. And again, we really thank you for being here and hope you have a great night.
Thank you so much, Estrella and